West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. About 2 hours ago, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives voted to formally open an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden by a narrow 9-vote margin entirely along party lines. Every single Republican voted to start the impeachment process over, well, it's not really clear. No one seems sure what exactly the charge is. And to be clear, the bar for productive discourse out of this historically unproductive Republican majority is as low as it gets. I mean, this is the same House Republican majority that took 15 votes just to elect a Speaker of the House. The same Republican majority that fired that guy after only a few months on the job and left the country without a Speaker, second in line to the presidency for 3 more weeks. The same Republican majority that is constantly at risk of being torn asunder by internal strife led by extremists and political nihilists with cultish devotion to the man who tried to destroy American democracy and is promising to do it again. But even by that low standard, this impeachment inquiry is as transparently cynical as anything they've done yet. They've been at this for nearly 3 years. I mean, from the moment President Biden was sworn in, they were waiting to impeach him. The facts could come later. Here's the thing about many House Republicans it's important to understand. They are just as adrift in the conspiracy fever swamp as the most extreme portions of the MAGA movement they represent. So over the past couple of years, I think a bunch of them convinced themselves that there really was some big smoking gun that would prove that Joe Biden was guilty of grifting money from foreign governments, which I think is the charge, although, again, not clear. Joe Biden, a man who really quite famously was among the poorest men in all of elected government, the federal level, for most of his tenure in Washington. That is the guy who they want you to believe was not just corrupt, but like wildly, unprecedentedly corrupt in front of everyone's faces while serving as vice president, and no one sniffed it out until now. That's the story. That claim, I think it's fair to say, is astonishingly difficult to believe, which is why Republicans have zeroed in on Biden's son, Hunter. Now, that's a man who has very publicly struggled with addiction and dysfunction for most of his adult life. House Republicans have hounded the president's son, Hunter Biden, to the ends of the earth for years. And so he actually showed up to Washington today to make his case for himself.
I am here to testify at a public hearing today to answer any of the committee's legitimate questions. Republicans do not want an open process where Americans can see their tactics, expose their baseless inquiry, or hear what I have to say. What are they afraid of? I'm here.
He's right. Republicans don't want an open process because that would risk exposing just how titanically weak their case actually is.
Mr. Biden said that his father had no involvement in his business dealings, period. How do you respond?
That's not what Devin Archer said. There was telephone, phone calls, meetings, dinners, you name it. We know what happened with Burisma in Ukraine in that December 4th through December 9th time frame.
First of all, Devin Archer actually did say that they had nothing to do with the business, so he's got that wrong. But get this. Think about that clip we just played. They are still, in the year of our Lord, 2023, trying to make Burisma a thing. Burisma. Now, in case you've forgotten, which you're forgiven for doing, Burisma is the widely debunked conspiracy theory that Donald Trump sent Rudy Giuliani to dig up in Ukraine. That's the one that Trump tried to threaten Zelensky into pushing publicly, even though it was nonsense. The actual high crime that Trump was impeached for the first time back in 2020, that's the source of it. So here we are, 4 years later, including nearly an entire year with a Republican House majority supposedly investigating these claims, and that's what they got? They got the thrown away wrapper of a scandal from 2020? They've got nothing. Don't take my word for it, though. Ask Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa.
I have no evidence of it, and I'm going to just follow the facts where they are, and the facts haven't taken me to that point where I can say that the president's guilty of anything.
That's Chuck Grassley. That is not some never Trump rhino. Chuck Grassley has been going after this stuff for years, too. If you still need convincing, the case against Biden is so thin as to be non-existent. Even the weatherman on the Fox and Friends couch isn't buying it.
Congressman, exit question for you. Have you found evidence that anybody broke any laws? You don't actually have any facts to that point. There's no evidence that Joe Biden did anything illegally. I heard you yesterday refer to them as a crime family, and this was organized crime. So make it easy for us. What was the crime?
Well, the crime is trading policy for money.
Which policy?
Well, we're going to get into that.
Just you wait. Congressman James Comer, chair of the House Oversight Committee, the guy leading the charge against Biden. That's their captain, my captain. He has done such a poor job outlining his case that he is getting torched by Steve Doocy, of all people. In fact, get this, Comer won't even go on Fox and Friends anymore. He is hiding in his new safe space on an even more MAGA network.
Why would Doocy say, if all the work you've done, that you have nothing? Why do you think that is?
Well, he's had that position from the very beginning. I've quit going on Fox and Friends because of Doocy.
Why would that mean Doocy, father of Doocy, do you like that? If your case is so thin that it won't even stand up to the soft-focused scrutiny of Fox and Friends, I think it might be time to admit that you just don't have the goods. But of course, James Comer and Jim Jordan and the rest of the MAGA caucus, I think those folks know they don't have the goods at this point. They understand as well as anyone how flimsy this case is, but they're going to do it anyway. For one reason and one reason only. Donald Trump wants them to do it.
I rise to oppose this perverse, illegitimate effort to do Donald Trump's political dirty work.
We're here today not because of any wrongdoing by President Biden, but because Donald Trump wants revenge. Welcome to the Donald Trump Revenge Show.
This has never been about the truth. This is about avenging Donald Trump.
The problem is they have zero evidence. The only crime is that Joe Biden blew out Donald Trump in the 2020 election.
There is a through line to all of this. Donald Trump will violate the law and Constitution to gain power and to keep it. And Republicans will enable him every step of the way.
Now, you might be saying that was just a bunch of Democrats. If you don't believe them, well, what about MAGA Republican Congressman Troy Nehls of Texas?
Representatives, what are you hoping to gain from an impeachment inquiry?
All I can see is Donald J. Trump 2024, baby.
Thank you, Congressman. There you have it. Remember, Donald Trump is facing the most legal peril of any major presidential candidate in the nation's history. He's very likely to be on trial at least once in the new year, perhaps more times. So his sycophants in Congress are desperate to counter-program with a trial of their own. That is all today's vote was about.
It is Thursday, the 14th of December of 2023, and You are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. That's right, just a little. Some people can't handle too much, and we don't force it either. You can just, do what you can do. Alrighty. Well, looks like Trump's in a bit of trouble. We'll see how this shakes out once things, and of course we're talking about his various appeals that have wended their way up to the Supreme Court. I'm not entirely enthusiastic that the Supreme Court will do the correct thing. They'll do the right thing with a capital R, moving to the right side of the political spectrum. I'm not too certain they'll do the correct thing in terms of, a constitutional representative democracy. I don't know. Because you got Clarence Thomas, who will not recuse, and there's any number of arguments that show that he doesn't need to. But I'm sorry, if your spouse was involved in the violent overthrow of the United States of America, I would probably think I'm not, the appearance. The appearance. It just doesn't look good, Clarence. But Harlan Crow put him there, and they've got their agenda. Not just Harlan, he's got a few others too, which is really rich when you think about Harlan Crow, whose brother at this very moment has been charged with sex trafficking. Every accusation they make is a confession. It is a confession. These people, and I got to tell you, when you walk around in the climes that they habitate, they are those people, okay? So I'm just saying, those people, I just love how they want to tone police the rest of us. They are, they've gotten to where they are because apparently they've been anointed by God on high. So they're godlike. So they can pass judgment on we mere mortals in our craven, crass lives. We need direction. We need Daddy to tell us what to do because we're doing it wrong. All the while they're sex trafficking and doing everything that they accuse others of doing. So I'm not too happy when when I hear all this pedophile BS. What are these sickos doing? We don't want children being mutilated, so we're going to storm this hospital that's been doing gender help for little kids. What are they doing to their own kids? What kind of mutilations are those kids going through? Whatever they say, I'd be investigating them highly. Yes. Every accusation is a confession. I don't know why that's so hard. Why won't law enforcement get behind that? Huh? All right. Well, it's getting towards the end of the week, and sometimes we get a little jovial in our, dark humor sort of way. It's the only way to survive. Okay. Well, on the other hand, getting back to the Supreme Court and these appeals that Jack Smith have pretty much put in the laps of the Supreme Court. It's just the level of conspicuous corruption. These people have moved from conspicuous consumption. Oh, that's not good enough anymore. We want conspicuous corruption in our faces, and there's nothing we can do about it. Okay, well, they've taken decades to get where they are. This didn't happen overnight. Okay, they could not, as hard as they tried, make this happen right away. They played the long game. And who did they learn it from? I've mentioned this many times before. I was always amazed that all those old Soviet fighters embraced the Soviet 50 and 70-year plan. If you don't know what the 50 and the 70-year plan in Soviet times are, it's pretty self-explanatory. They made a plan for the next 50 and the next 70 years. They played the long game. And I got to tell you, that old KGB guy Vlad's been carrying on the old 50, 70-year plan. And here we are. Now, I've been mentioning this in not so jovial, joking of a way for years and years and years. But what if it is as simple as Vlad pretty much having Trump and the whole GOP in his pocket? Literally, he's bought them all off, and they are traitors all. What if? We already know what if. Notice how hardly anybody remembers that the NRA was infiltrated by Russian spies who then were responsible for doling out buku amounts of laundered Russian rubles through the NRA to every GOP member in the legislature, down to dog catchers on the local level. There was only one party that embraced that. And if anybody on our side did it, they're going to jail, if they haven't already been sent. But I'm telling you, we see it in real time. A whole party embracing the most batshit crazy Russian ops, psyops, active measures. It's chaos. Even this Vivek, is that how you pronounce his name now? Vivek, not Vivek? Vivek? Ramaswamy? He's a chaos agent. It's clear as day. Is he doing it for the money? No, sometimes people are either dupes or useful idiots. One or the other, maybe sometimes a combination of both at times. But I would say at this point, there's not that many useful idiots and dupes in the Republican Party right now, in leadership and the voters, the legislative parts of that party. I don't think there's that many. They're pretty close to being just full-blown assets at this point. One of Vlad's strategies, and it was easy because the burgeoning former Soviet bloc, all those countries were new to the representative democracy game. You know, at least we had a couple hundred years before we even got to the point of having a revolution. I'm just saying, you know, we call ourselves a young country, but we actually took quite a bit of time before we became, you know, the semblance of a representative democracy. And then we had quite a bit of time, too, so, you know, a couple hundred years. Even had a civil war. Which I gotta tell you, we're, you know, sort of the last dregs of the British loyalists. They were the Patriots, which was us. And then they were the loyalists, who were, you know, on the king's side. They never went away. We even had to fend them off in 1812. They burned down the White House even. And still we kept our shit together. And then the last dregs of those caused the Civil War because they just could not stand being able to have a business without enslaving somebody. How am I going to get any work done around here? I got to pay people. That's no way to make money. So We've had some fits and starts, and we've had quite a bit of experience. So what Vlad did, though, in these burgeoning democracies is attack the very institutions that made them what they were going to be. And part of that was the judiciary, and not only just part of it, but a main component. Here we are. Old Soviet fighters using the 50-year plan, the 70-year plan, eroding the very aspect of what it is to be a judge. So people don't have any faith in those institutions, and then we'll just go ahead and say, yeah, we like that guy. He's so strong. And then we're all lined up at the rock pile, and there's going to be some people going, well, at least what he's doing is he's just expressing his strength. Okay. Sorry, but I don't want to be in front of the rock pile. Okay? I want these people put in prison before we ever get to that. Okay. Do I sound like a guy at the end of the bar? I must. Well, the guys at the end of the bar don't necessarily curate some of their debatable points, and I'll say it is debatable. I'll say it's debatable whether it's debatable. Anyway, what do we have in store for you here? And remember when this is referring to the top clip there with old Troy Nels of Texas. I remember Kevin McCarthy letting the cat out of the proverbial bag too when he said, look all that we did to Hillary Clinton. We've been hammering her for all this time, and now she's so dirty. We dirtied her. We can't have her now. Her poll numbers went down. All we had to do is just continue this frivolous Benghazi investigation that has no bearings in reality. Not one whit, but you know what? It worked because her poll numbers went down, and that's good for us. And little Troy Nell's offhand remark, all I'm thinking is Donald Trump 2024, baby. Let's impeach Joe. Over what? They keep saying that they got foreign money. No, Joe never got any. But you know who did? The guy they're following orders from, making the accusations. Every accusation is a confession. Start from there, put him in the interrogation room, and, bear down. Then on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, my Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon says the company managing the facilities at Crater Lake National Park has created unsafe conditions that threaten the park, visitors, and the employees who live and work there. The vandalization of the beloved Lake Merritt Menorah in Oakland, California, is being investigated as a hate crime. And a Texas high school black student suspended for months over his hairstyle likely won't return to class anytime soon because it is, after all, Texas. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where independent news outlets and NGOs condemned Hungary's new sovereignty protection law as a way to silence critics, and it has. And in related news, a Thailand court sentenced a newly elected parliamentarian to 6 years in prison. They sentenced her to 6 years in prison for defaming the monarchy. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. And the chat room is monitored, of course, by Kelly Lincoln, as you know. And Kelly is quite a busy gal, and we thank her for doing everything that she does here. Thank you, Kelly. If you out there in radio listening land would look across our homepage to the left from that chat room link, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And I know that this is a tough time of year, but I'm going to say this anyway. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us tackle the ever-increasing bills and costs of running this powerhouse of resistance. So your generosity has really helped us do that. And then we found that when we pay our bills, we fly under the radar and we get away with a lot. Boy, do we ever. But thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's not going to be X. I don't care. Okay, it's Twitter. Anyway, you can follow us there on Mastodon, on Spoutable, on Blue Sky, on Facebook. You could do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, except we all take care of Facebook, is what I'm finding out. So there, okay, follow us all there. You can also follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, yada, yada, yada. You can follow all of those at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, so you can follow my social media feeds, and then you'll be able to get quick access to those show notes and links on Daily Co's. And then you can read the actual articles that we draw such great inspiration from. Yes, we do. You can also follow the show for now on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. You just cannot find them on Stitcher. You can't. Okay. I'll be flogging that for a while. I'm sorry. Okay. Keep telling you that, but I just have to remind you. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and this is out of Oregon Public Broadcasting, their website, by Eric Newman. The hospitality management company Aramark has managed facilities at the national park since 2018. In his letter to National Park Service's Director Charles F. Chuck Sams III on Friday last, Wyden said he was alarmed by the serious failure of the concessionaire to fulfill its responsibility at the park. His letter identifies at least 3 diesel spills in 2023, unsatisfactory public health inspections in the Lodge restaurant, and a lack of security to protect employee safety. The latter of these is especially troubling, given reports that serious assaults and other criminal activity has occurred in the dorms, and no acceptable security measures have been implemented to increase security and privacy in dorms, bathrooms, and showers, Wyden wrote. Addie Mazzari was a lead server at the Crater Lake Lodge dining room last summer. She said she was shocked at the condition of the employee dorm housing when she first arrived for work. I opened the door, and literally there were mice running around everywhere, and it was just filthy, she said. Massry has worked seasonally for the past 5 years, including at Yellowstone and Mount Rainier National Parks, where private concessionaires manage and maintain restaurants, gift shops, and lodges. She said employee housing at parks usually is not great, but the conditions allowed by Aramark was disgusting. She witnessed open garbage cans exposed to wildlife, a motorized skiff that she said sank in the pristine Caldera's lake, and regular complaints from customers who did not have heat in their rooms at Crater Lake Lodge. Massery said the National Park Service works in a law enforcement capacity at the park, as well as performing facilities inspections. They were doing an inspection of our employee dorms, and they actually officially condemned the building this year, she said. They told Aramark they were not allowed to charge us anymore to live there because it was so bad. Come work for us and we'll charge you. How nice is that? 2 Aramark spokespeople did not respond to an interview request, but instead emailed the following statement. We take these concerns very seriously, and the examples provided are not reflective of Aramark standards. We have been working on improvements to our operations at Crater Lake National Park, with recent upgrades to cabins at Mazama Village, refreshed rooms, I like that, refreshed, at Crater Lake Lodge, renovations at the Rim Village Cafe and Gift Shop, and the delivery of new eco-friendly boats for scenic tours. Additional investments are planned to address other important aspects of our operations, and we will continue to work closely with the National Park Service to improve the staff and visitor experience. Oh, how nice. Aramark was also selected to manage operations at the Oregon Caves National Monument, and that was in 2018, including the cave's retail operation and the Oregon Caves Chateau. The company also manages concessions at Yosemite National Park and Grand Canyon National Park. Madeline Medina of the San Francisco Chronicle brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Oakland police are investigating the destruction of a large menorah located near Lake Merritt that was vandalized early yesterday morning, Wednesday. In a statement to SF Gate, the Chronicle, the Oakland Police Department said it is investigating the vandalization, which happened around 1:30 a.m. near 12th Street and Lake Merritt Boulevard, as a hate crime. The incident comes during Hanukkah, which is celebrated this year from Thursday, December 7th to Friday, December 15th. The menorah was torn apart and thrown in the lake, the Oakland side reported. Jewish leaders said they believe the same vandals spray-painted anti-Israel and anti-Semitic graffiti on the sidewalk where the menorah was destroyed. Oakland Mayor Shane Tao condemned the vandalism in a statement yesterday. She said she joined the city's Jewish community this past weekend when the menorah was officially lit. The Lake Merritt menorah is a long-standing and important symbol for Oakland's Jewish community, and it breaks my heart that it was vandalized, Tao said. Rabbi David Lebkowski, who is part of the Chabad Jewish Center in Oakland, told the Oakland side and SF Gate they rebuilt the menorah last night around 5 p.m. Lozano and Cheyenne Mumphrey of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Texas high school black student who has been disciplined and kept away from his classroom for months for refusing to change his hairstyle is not likely to be back with his regular classmates anytime soon. Efforts by Darrell George's attorney to ask a judge to pause his punishment by his Houston area school district over his locks, as well as a civil rights lawsuit he and his family filed in September, remain on hold in federal court. George, age 18, returned to in-school suspension at his campus, Barbers Hill High School in Mount Bellevue, Texas. And that was last week. And for now, he will remain there. Before that, he had spent a month at an off-site disciplinary program. Here are some of the things to know regarding why his discipline over his hairstyle has continued for months, why his school district believes its actions have been justified, and how various legal issues are complicating George's situation. George was first pulled from his classroom in August after school officials said his locks fell below his eyebrows and earlobes and violated the district's dress code. His family argues his hairstyle does not break any rules. Allie Booker, the attorney for George's family, said after a hearing yesterday, Wednesday, on the federal lawsuit that people have been trying to tell George he should just give up and cut his hair, but he's not going to break. He's strong. He's like, I'm not going to cut my hair, but I just can't believe I'm going through this, Booker said. But Booker added she fears George could ultimately be expelled. George's family has argued his punishment is discriminatory and violates the Crown Act, which became law in Texas in September, and is intended to prohibit race-based hair discrimination and bars employers and schools from penalizing people because of hair texture or protective hairstyles, including afros, braids, dreadlocks, twists, or Bantu knots. In court filings, attorneys for the Barbers Hill School District have said students don't have a protected right under federal law to wear their hair at the length and style of their choice while attending school. During Wednesday's court hearing, Jonathan Brush, one of the school district attorneys, said Barbers Hill has for decades had a hair restriction policy for male students related to length, and locks have always been permitted, Brush said. Jaleesa Reed, an assistant professor at Cornell, whose research focuses on the intersections of beauty, culture, identity, and place, informed by human geography, she said, repeated attempts to control black hair expression through such policy shows the need for the Crown Act at the federal level. Rather than punishing students, and providing opportunities to learn more about cultural hairstyles could enrich their learning environment and foster acceptance of differences. Actually, no one gives a F about each other's hairstyle except, that looks cool. William Sherman, an attorney in Washington, D.C., and the legal strategist for the Crown Act, said that George is being denied an education. Why? Because his hairstyle does not fit the Eurocentric ideal of neat and clean. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to this edition of PCD Soundbites. I'm Karen Ngowe, filling in for your host, Latoya Simmons. Current guidelines recommend adults get at least 2.5 hours of moderate-intensity aerobic activity a week, like brisk walking. But many Americans don't get enough physical activity to meet this guideline, which can lead to chronic disease and premature death. Joining me today is Dr. Susan Carlson, a lead epidemiologist in CDC's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity. We'll be discussing her research, which aims to estimate the percentage of U.S. deaths attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Thank you for being here, Susan.
Thank you for inviting me, Karen.
Susan, give us a brief overview of your study.
As Karen stated, the current aerobic physical activity guideline recommends that adults participate weekly in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, or its equivalent for substantial health benefits. The health benefits include such things as lowering the risk of premature death, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancers, and depression. In our study, we first examined what influence physical activity levels below the current guideline have on premature mortality, and we wanted to look at whether this association differed by age. The second purpose was really to estimate the percentage of deaths that are attributable to levels of physical activity that are inadequate to meet the current guideline.
What did your research reveal about the association between inadequate physical activity and premature death among American adults?
So in a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults, we found that adults with levels of physical activity inadequate to meet current guidelines had an increased risk of premature death. Overall, we found that 8.3% of deaths were attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Our findings suggest that if you increase adults' physical activity levels to meet the current guidelines, this is likely one way to reduce the risk of premature death in the United States.
What did you find when you looked at this association in different age groups?
We did not find a significant association between physical activity level and mortality in adults aged 25 to 39. However, for those aged 40 to 69 and 70 or older, we found that not meeting the guideline was associated with an increased risk of premature mortality.
How did these findings compare to previous similar studies?
We found that our estimates were similar or slightly lower when comparing to similar studies that have examined this association. In general, our estimates of the percent of deaths attributable to inadequate levels of physical activity is not practically different from other studies.
Do you think researchers have become better at estimating the percentage of deaths attributed to inadequate physical activity?
Estimating the percentage can be challenging. Many of the previous studies that have provided these estimates have done so by combining estimates across different sources. This can really bias results, especially if there are differences in the populations or if the physical activity measure differs. When you use a survival analysis conducted in a single population, which is what we did in this study, you can overcome a lot of these biases and improve your estimates. Facilitating the linking of CDC survey data from systems like the National Health Interview Survey to mortality data can really help researchers explore these issues.
How do you think this research can be used to help get adults moving and reduce the risk of premature death associated with inadequate physical activity?
So we found in this study that a significant portion of deaths were attributed to lower levels of physical activity. By estimating the public health burden of low levels of physical activity, this can be important for setting research and program priorities and for public health planning at the national, state, and local level. Ultimately, individuals make the decision to be active. However, this decision can be made easier by programs and policies that provide opportunities for physical activity and by making communities more activity-friendly. By working collaboratively across different sectors, communities across the nation can help to increase physical activity levels and potentially reduce the risk of premature death.
Thank you, Susan. You can read her study, Percentage of Deaths Associated with Inadequate Physical Activity in the United States, online at cdc.gov/PCD. The findings and conclusions in this report are those of the author and do not necessarily represent the official position of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom.
could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. There was another plot twist in New York's redistricting drama, as New York's highest court threw out a special master's congressional maps and directed the State Redistricting Commission to try again. Voters established the partisan-appointed New York Independent Redistricting Commission, or IRC, in 2014 in hopes of ending partisan gerrymandering. It didn't. The advisory-only IRC deadlocked, instead submitting only one Democratic map and one Republican map, with the legislature rejecting both. The Democrat-dominated legislature then gerrymandered the map for partisan advantage. Those maps were thrown out by an appeals court in 2022, and a special master drew more competitive maps used during the midterm election, flipping 6 congressional seats Republican. Democrats sued, arguing that the IRC never fulfilled its constitutional duty of having 2 attempts at drawing maps. December 12th, a state appeals court agreed, throwing out the special master's more competitive maps and mandating that the Redistricting Commission draw new ones, saying in its ruling, "We are holding the IRC and legislature to what the Constitution demands and will do so as often as necessary to secure compliance with its mandate." The decision could have consequences far beyond New York, potentially shifting control of the U.S. Congress. Will the IRC deadlock again? Will New York legislators listen to voters and draw competitive maps? Stay tuned for more drama at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day machinists at Boeing ended their 69-day strike. 33,000 workers won increased pay and health benefits. They also won job protections against subcontracting. Contractual clauses against subcontracting were important, especially given the fact that NAFTA had just been passed 2 years earlier. The contract specified that the union be given 3 months' notice regarding any plans to subcontract out work. It also incentivized keeping work in-house by calling for increased benefits to laid-off workers and mandatory retraining and re-employment of workers displaced by subcontracting. These provisions came after IAM members rejected 2 previous contract offers. They were furious at the initial demands for concessions, even as Boeing executives were awarded multi-million-dollar stock options. At the time, the IAM and its members lauded this as a total victory. For a few years, Boeing abided by the contract they signed. Subsequently, Boeing bosses have routinely violated their agreements. Many of these provisions were lost in the 2002 contract and then recaptured in 2008. But the next contract negotiations witnessed a renewed fight for job security. Over the past 2 decades, Boeing workers have seen massive layoffs, subcontracting, pension freezes and phase-outs, and relocation of their work. All while the company rakes in billions of dollars in profits, gets lucrative tax breaks and subsidies, and has close to 5,000 back orders for planes. Subcontracting clauses are important, but can only work when they are enforced. Victories like the winning strike in 1995 can serve as a reminder for workers today that if they stand together in solidarity, they can win better wages, hours, and conditions at the bargaining table.
Stick
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low to mid-50s, partly cloudy throughout the day, winds light and variable, then partly cloudy overnight, with more clouds accumulating as the night wears on, lows in the mid-30s, winds light and variable, then mostly cloudy skies early tomorrow will become partly cloudy later in the day, highs in the mid-50s, winds light and variable. Pollen is rated as none here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 81 parts per million, and we are also in an air stagnation warning, so people should take care if they have breathing problems. The daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.19 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that makes up the Weather Underground. London is 46 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 47 degrees and partly cloudy with a flood advisory. Rome is 58 degrees and partly cloudy with its own wind advisory that happens quite often recently. Bagram is 38 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 31 with fog. Hong Kong is 74 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 50 degrees and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 61 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48, partly cloudy with a beach advisory. Do not turn your back on the ocean. Chicago, Illinois is 41 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is a bracing 38 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Justin Spike of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Independent media outlets and rights groups condemned legislation passed by Hungary's right-wing populist government that would allow authorities to investigate and prosecute people accused of undermining the country's sovereignty. The coalition government, made up of the Fidesz and the KDNP parties, approved the Sovereignty Protection Act on Tuesday. It calls for the creation of a new government authority that will have the power to gather information on any groups or individuals that benefit from foreign funding and that influence public debate. The measure requires Hungary's secret services to assist the authority in its investigations and allows prison terms of up to 3 years for anyone convicted of violating the law. Opponents of the legislation have compared it to Russia's foreign agent law and say its broad language can be used to arbitrarily target government critics. The country's right-wing Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, who met with the Republican Party just days ago to fill them in on how to take over a government, has long been accused of taking over the majority of Hungary's media and building an autocratic political system that undermines democratic norms. Coming to an America near you.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jeremy Harmer of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A court in Thailand convicted and sentenced a recently elected lawmaker yesterday, Wednesday, to 6 years in prison for defaming the monarchy under a controversial law that guards the royal institution. Human Rights Watch decried the ruling, saying it violated her rights to freedom of expression protected under international human rights law. Rukchanuk Srinork arrived for her court hearing in the capital, Bangkok, as her fellow lawmakers were convening in Parliament. I submitted a request to postpone the hearing because today the new Parliament convenes for its first session, but the court refused. So I came here to hear the verdict, she told reporters, standing next to her party leader, who was there to lend support. She was charged over 2 posts she allegedly shared 2 years ago on Twitter. One tweet reportedly defamed the monarchy over links to a coronavirus vaccine, and an anti-monarchy quote by 18th century French philosopher Denis Diderot was allegedly retweeted. Rukchanuk was sentenced to 3 years on each count under Article 112 of Thailand's criminal code, known as lèse majesté, which protects the monarchy. She was also convicted under the Computer Crime Act, whose broad provisions covering online activities has been criticized as a threat to freedom of expression. The court granted her release on bail of equivalent to about $14,200 U.S. If it had been denied, she would have lost her lawmaker status immediately. The parliamentarian denied she posted the tweets, calling the case against her weak. The plaintiff reportedly provided screenshots of the post, but the police could not find the links. Rukchanuk, aged 29, won a seat in May's general election, part of a surprise victory for the Progressive Move Forward party that shook Thai politics. The win, though, did not translate into power due to the party being ultimately outmaneuvered by influential conservative forces. She was initially a defender of the conservative establishment before switching sides and joining the progressives. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière en mon Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.